Okay guys, this one's going to be a little different from the other ones. We're going to tell you the story of the knockdown. The knockdown occurred at night, so there's no video footage. So I drew a series of pictures, and I'm going to just sort of tell you the story. This is the story for the real sailors out there. This is the kind of thing that terrifies us. We were sailing along much like this. In fact, the knockdown occurred about an hour after this video was taken. Things were calm, very little wind, very calm seas. Just sailing along, looking around, checking out the clouds. Everything's cool. Then the wind dies from 5 knots down to 2 knots, down to 1.6, 1.2. We were reaching into it. We were close hauled into the wind. So, some of you might be following our video channel, and maybe some of you aren't. My name's Lexi, I'm the captain of WildChild, and I'm sailing with my husband Michelle. We're on board our 40-foot C&C, and we're a couple of Canadian sailors trying to make it from Lake Erie, the Great Lakes in Ontario, Canada, and make our way up through the St. Lawrence River, out the east coast of Canada, down the east coast of the United States, to hide in Chesapeake Bay by around mid-October or the end of October. We left from the city of Port Colborne on Lake Erie, where you see the green hexagon. We slowly made our way through the Welland Canal, across Lake Ontario, and up through the St. Lawrence Seaway. Those are our previous videos. We meandered. Usually it was just day sailing, because almost every day we were able to find a place to anchor. We tried to push 30 to 50 nautical miles a day. A few days ago we made it to the small French fishing village called Rimouski in the fog. It was so foggy we couldn't see the front of the boat. So we stayed there for a night and rested, and we left about 4 days ago. We spent 3 days and 2 nights slowly hopping our way along the coast till we arrived at the small French fishing village of Mont-Louis, where you see the red X in the box. We woke up really early yesterday, and we left Mont-Louis around 5 o'clock in the morning. Conditions were calm and conditions were good. The wind was forecast to be offshore all day, coming from the south to southwest. That was fine for us. That meant the other edge of the lake, of the river, would be the wavy side. We've been making our way along all day, moving between 2 and 7 knots as the wind varied, and we had thermals in the morning and thermals in the evenings, and no wind in the afternoon, and then the wind picked up, and as all wind forecasts are unreliable and can't be trusted, remarkably we had the wind from the east for the evening around dinner time till sunset. We'd been close hauled and sailing into the wind. It was a very light wind, which was laying down the swells from the day before. Most of the day we were sailing in 2 and 3 foot swells, and by evening the swells had been pushed down to 1 to 2 feet as the gentle east wind sort of was working against the waves, which were heading from west to east. The wind was going from east to west. It was after sunset, about half an hour after sunset. We're sailing along, everything's calm. The wind completely dies when it happens. The worst 10 seconds we ever sailed. Hopefully you guys can forgive my crude artistic skills in MS Paint, but I think the simple illustrations will help to explain the story. This is our sailboat with our beautiful 6-foot lead keel 8 feet under the water, and our 53-foot mast sticking above. A sailboat sort of wants to be vertical. You'd rather have your mast pointing at the sky and your keel pointing at the bottom. I know I said this video was for sailors, but let's assume some of you are not sailors. Sailing wing on wing. Sailing wing on wing is something that sailors do only when the wind is coming from behind the boat, and it has to be from dead behind the boat. You move your mainsail and boom off to one side of the boat, and you move your front sail to the other side of the boat so both sails can catch the maximum amount of air and drive you forward. Sailing wing on wing is good in light winds, precarious in strong winds, and a little bit tricky in that you have to keep the boat on a dead run. The wind has to stay directly behind the boat. We had been sailing all day, and now it was into the evening. The winds were on the nose, even though they were forecast to be on the beam or behind us. The winds were really light, probably between 1.7 and 2.5 knots. They were light and squirrely and unsure of themselves. We just had dinner, and Michelle was down below laying in the passage bunk, waiting for his shift around 11. The sun was setting and the winds were so light, I was debating just furling up the sails, motoring to the nearest point of shore, and anchoring for the night. We wanted to try to sail all night long to make it around the corner to New Brunswick, so for the upcoming winds on the weekend, we would have offshore winds and not get trapped on the north shore. So to understand, this is pretty much a typical sailing position for me, usually sitting back relaxing at the helm. I always wear my life jacket. There I'm in my foul weather gear, and I'm holding the bungee cord that we attach right to the backstay and to the strap around our life jackets to hold us in. You have to understand that we're in the North Atlantic in September and that water temperature is 6 degrees Celsius. You won't last long if you fall in. Every 5 minutes or so you get up, stand at the helm, look around, scan the horizon, check the instruments, and sit back down and relax. When you're standing, the bungee cord keeps you tethered to the boat so you can't fall out, but it gives you just enough freedom of movement that you can see the instruments and you can reach the wheel and do what you have to do. And so, strapped in, relaxing, I'd sat there for about an hour watching the winds as they slowly died, and we were bobbing. Eventually the wind died off completely, and I thought, well, maybe this is just thermal effects, because of the sunset, the warmer air over the land, colder air over the water. Why don't we just wait and see how it settles out? And sure enough, as predicted, the wind slowly started to come around from behind. Slowly at first, 1 knot, 2 knots, 3 knots, just enough and on a run. So I thought, this is great, let's take advantage of it. And I began to open the boat up wing on wing. And so with the new wind, I got up, unstrapped myself from the backstay, went forward to the bench, and adjusted the jenny to bring it over to the starboard side, and even bagged it out a little bit to catch as much wind as possible. So, I'd just gotten the starboard jenny sheet locked up into the self-tailing winch, looked at my sails, looked at the wind, looked at the skies, and there you have it. We're wing on wing with the wind dead behind at 3 knots. Everything's perfect. The seas are calm, the skies are clear. We're beautifully running wing on wing with 3 knots of wind. I turned my back from the winch, had crawled along the bench to return back to the helm when it happened. An invisible wall of wind that we could not see coming that hit us like a brick wall. In that brief period of time it took me to set the winch and return to the helm, we got hit. We got hit so hard, I didn't even make it back to the cockpit. The wind accelerated from 3 knots to 34.4 knots in 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, the boat launched from 1 knot of boat speed to 9 knots of boat speed, careening wildly out of control. We had full sails up, completely wide open, wing on wing, when we got hit by a wall of wind at 34.4 knots out of nowheres. All of a sudden, just like that, out of the blue, WildChild is lurching forward under the enormous strain of the powerful force of the wind that had just hammered us forward. Fully exposed and vulnerable, all sails out, the front sail just filled, the boat heeled over, and I almost fell out of the boat. I wasn't strapped in, and 3 seconds earlier, everything was calm as can be. I'm fighting my way to get back to the helm station, and now, in 34 knots of wind, the boat is careening wildly out of control, rolling back and forth and lurching forward. I'm doing everything I can not to fall out of the boat. It is wildly out of control. It's lurching side to side. I'm clinging to everything I can get my hands on, praying that I don't get tossed out of the boat in the cold North Atlantic. We might only be 2 miles from shore, but you will freeze before you get there. Finally, I get to the wheel and try to get control. I turn off the autopilot, which wasn't able to resist against the enormous forces involved, and I bring the boat as far over to starboard as I can. She kind of rights herself and then flops back over to the port side, and down below, poor Michelle's getting tossed around back and forth. It's absolute chaos in the cockpit. Here I am with the boat wing on wing, this enormous wall of wind coming from behind, and I'm losing control of the boat. She's slamming side to side. I know at this point at the helm, the only thing that I can try and do is don't let the wind get to the beam, get to the side of the boat, or she will roll over, she will lay down. I'm hanging on for dear life as the boat's violently throwing itself from side to side. I'm trying to grab the wheel, but I have no rudder response. The rudder isn't powerful enough to resist the forces that are coming from behind. And then it happens. The boat turns sideways to the wind and we get knocked down. We don't exactly lay the mast in the water, but I would say the 65-foot mast top of it was only 15 feet above the surface of the water. I was clinging on for dear life, but God bless the designers of CNC yachts. They know what they're doing. She rounded up into the wind. She went sideways to the wind, spilled all her air, and God bless her enormous 9,000-pound, 6-foot lead keel 8 feet under the boat, because she rounded into the wind, dumped the air, and came back up. But now I've got the boat facing into a sustained 30 knots of wind with full sails. I'm going to fall off the wind again, and I'd better figure out what to do about that. As the boat swings round, running again in 30 knots of wind, Michel manages to get his feet under him, pops his head up, and comes running out in his underwear. He immediately sizes up the situation and realizes we have too much sail out. So he goes to furl the jenny. I'm at the helm just trying to keep us running downwind so we don't round up again. He releases the main sheet off the starboard winch and hands it to me and says, "Honey, control this and let it out." He's pulling for all his might and the sail's flapping in front of us, but at least it's dumped its energy. The sail furls kind of back over on itself, but at least we get it in. Now we're running downwind in a sustained 28 to 32 knots of wind with just the mainsail. We're sort of under control now in that I can steer the boat, but we have no way to stop this, and we have no way of knowing how long it's going to be. So now the fight is on. We've got to get this under control, and we've got to make this end safely.